It's time for Recipe of the Day. Smothered pork chops are classic Southern comfort food. You get juicy pork chops in a spicy, creamy onion gravy. Super easy to make, very satisfying. Let's dive in. One of my favorite things about this recipe, other than how it tastes, is that you actually make a seasoned flour mixture that serves a double purpose. So we're going to be mixing together some all-purpose flour with seasonings and then dredging the pork chops in there. Not all the flour is going to end up sticking to the outside of the pork chops, though. We take the pork chops out of the flour, shake them off into the bowl of flour, and then we cook the pork chops, and then later we use the rest of that seasoned flour to thicken and flavor the gravy. So it gets used twice, but you're only mixing together everything once. I think it saves time and it's very, very tasty. So you're starting by mixing that together in a large bowl. Mix together 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour, 1.5 teaspoons of onion powder, 1.5 teaspoons of paprika, a teaspoon of salt, 3/4 teaspoon of garlic powder, and 3/4 teaspoon of black pepper. And then if you want to, you can add cayenne as well. The recipe calls for 3/4 teaspoon. It is quite spicy if you use that amount, so just be warned. You can leave it out and just have the black pepper be the spiciness here, or add that cayenne in, the full 3/4 teaspoon, or less, 1/4 teaspoon, wherever you want to go with that. So that is the spice blend. You mix that up, then you are adding 4 pork chops to that bowl of seasoning and tossing them all around until they're evenly coated. What kind of pork chops? We've got bone-in ribeye pork chops that are 3/4 to 1 inch thick. A bone-in ribeye pork chop is very similar to a bone-in ribeye steak. Those are almost the same cut, just the different animal, and so that's what you're looking for. You want that bone. It keeps it kind of juicy along there, but it is a leaner loin meat for most of that chop. Nice and thick, very satisfying. If you have boneless pork chops or anything thinner than the 3/4 to 1 inch thick, you can still make this recipe. You're just going to cook them for less long. You're going to see in a moment I'm going to be telling you to brown them and then take them out of the skillet, and then later they go back into the sauce. If you have a thinner pork chop or a boneless one, that's not going to take as long to cook. Once it goes into the sauce, you're only simmering it until it's cooked through. So that's where the time will be shortened there. So you can use any kind of pork chop that you have. Okay, so you added those pork chops to the bowl of seasoned flour, toss it all around until they're all coated. Then you're going to heat a large skillet over medium-high heat and add 2 tablespoons of cooking oil to there. I'm using grapeseed oil, but whatever you like to use. When it's hot, you're adding the pork chops in there in a single layer, but shake them over the bowl of flour first to get any excess flour off of them before you add them to the pan. But don't throw out that flour. Remember, we're using it again. Okay, now you're cooking those pork chops until they're well browned. It's going to be about 4 to 5 minutes per side. Flip them over when they're brown underneath and then do the other side. And really, we're just looking for the browning here because they're going to finish cooking later. So once they're browned, you transfer them to a plate. You can tent them with foil if you want. It keeps them warmer, but it's not necessary. Okay, then you're reducing the heat to low on that skillet and you're adding a tablespoon of butter. Let that melt in there, and then you're going in with a whole large onion sliced. Now, I like a really big onion here because I want a lot of onion in this gravy. If you like onion less, you can use a smaller onion. And then I'm doing it in slices, so I get the skin off of the onion and cut the ends off and then cut it in half, and then I slice so I get these half moons, and then they're kind of strands in the gravy, which I just find more pronounced, you really know those are onions, rather than if you chopped it finely. Okay, you are cooking, stirring that onion occasionally until it's softened. It's just going to take a few minutes. Then you're adding 2 cloves of minced garlic, and you're going to cook and stir that for 30 seconds. Then sprinkle the rest of your seasoned flour over the onion and garlic in there. Increase the heat to medium and just cook and stir for a minute. We're just lightly toasting that flour, and then you're going to slowly drizzle in 2 cups of chicken broth, just a little at a time while you're stirring so that you don't get lumps in the flour. And then once you've added all the chicken broth, you're still stirring, you're going to add 1/2 cup of heavy cream. Now, I will say that this is going to be simmering for a little while, and so I don't recommend that you use a different kind of dairy here, because when you heat dairy to a high temperature, it can break and curdle, and you don't want that to happen. So do the heavy cream here. Now, if you do use something else and it does curdle, just remember it It is perfectly safe to eat. It just looks a little weird. That is all. I will say that if you wanted to skip the heavy cream entirely, you can. You'll still have a thick sauce from the flour. And something that you could do if you wanted to is later, when everything is cooked and you've taken the skillet of pork chops and sauce and everything off of the heat, make sure it has stopped simmering entirely. Just wait a couple of minutes off the heat there, and then you can stir in either some sour cream or even low-fat Greek yogurt. It's going to be fine here. Plain, of course, you don't want flavored yogurt. And so you could stir that in about half a cup at the end. And because you've taken it off the heat, it is very unlikely to curdle. Okay, but I'm assuming that you have done the chicken broth and the heavy cream both in the skillet. Then you're adding the pork back into the skillet with the sauce, overlapping the pieces as little as possible, spoon sauce up over the pork chops, bring that mixture up to a simmer over medium-high heat, and then reduce it to low, put a lid on the skillet or some foil if that's what you have, and cook until the pork is at least 145 degrees Fahrenheit in the middle. That's going to be only slightly pink in the middle. 145 degrees Fahrenheit is the safe temperature for pork. If you like yours more white, like cooked through, you're going to 160 degrees Fahrenheit instead. Either way, it's not going to take that long. It's like 10 to 15 minutes, and then the pork is cooked through. Take the lid off. If you want your sauce to be thicker, you can continue to simmer it for a little bit longer and it'll thicken up even more, 3 to 5 minutes. Or if you like the texture it is already, you're fine. Then you're taking it off the heat, give it a taste, add more salt if you'd like, and you're serving the pork chops topped with that sauce and onions. So delicious. I want some mashed potatoes under there as well. That's a great dinner. Okay, I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there. Everything there is arranged by date, so it's helpful to know that today is December 2nd of 2025. I am Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all-new chicken cookbook, cookfor2.us, and this podcast recipe of the day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.